you guys move or things, I need you to move my footstool too, because my feet won't touch the ground without it. And I feel like a little kid going like this, you know?
Okay. Christina, are we ready?
Mayor, we're ready when you are.
Okay, great, thank you. Good evening. I would like to call the December 13th, 2023 study session meeting to order. City Clerk, may we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Gutierrez?
Here.
Councilmember Gregory?
Here.
Councilmember Ross? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Carnevale?
Here.
Mayor Lamb?
Here, thank you. And City Clerk, will you please, or excuse me, are there any changes to the agenda?
I have no changes, Mayor.
Okay, great. And City Clerk, will you please read the statement of participation?
Public comment is the opportunity for members of the public to comment on items that are within the City Council's jurisdiction but not on the agenda. Because of restrictions contained in California law, the City Council may not discuss or act on any item not on the agenda, but may briefly respond to statements made or ask a question for clarification. The mayor may also request a brief response from staff to questions raised during public comment or request that a matter be agendized for a future meeting. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes. If you are a member of the public and you wish to address the City Council, please complete a request to speak form available at the entrance and submit it to the City Clerk. You will be called upon at the appropriate time. If you have materials or other items to present to the members of the City Council, please do not approach them. All materials shall be presented to the City Clerk for distribution. Mayor, I did not receive any requests to speak, and I do not have any members of the public in the audience.
Okay, thank you. Any members of the council? All right, we'll move on to the first study session item. Item A, special use permit procedure discussion. And may we have a staff report, please, City Manager? Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Ryan Hunt will give the presentation. We've been observing some things over the past years, really, as we've had more events in the amphitheater and other locations, and particularly third-party events, and have some items that we'd like to get your feedback on for potential action at a future meeting. Ryan?
Thank you, City Manager, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. Wanted to start first by thanking you all for your support of Snowfest, both with the sponsorships of the villages and also your participation in the event. I don't think she's here, but if you could report back that I am giving her a personal thank you. Joanne Kennan, our event organizer, wanted to thank her for all her hard work. Really was a special event, and I want to thank all of our hardworking city staff, from Public Works to police to fire to facilities. It really takes a village to put all of these together, and obviously all of our hardworking volunteers as well. So wanted to thank you all for that. I really appreciate the support. So as we kind of move forward with this discussion, I wanted to kind of clarify that this really is seeking your guidance and feedback. These are all just proposed changes, kind of as we're experimenting with how we can make things better from a liability protection standpoint for the city with events. And so you'll see some numbers in here, but they're very, very preliminary. Nothing's been adopted or set in stone. Obviously, this is for you all as just a presentation only. So I wanted to clarify that. And if you want to stop me along the way, however you all see fit as far as asking me questions, if you want to do that, I'll stop and happy to answer any questions that you have. So I think the first thing that we've noticed from a protection standpoint, with our city facilities and events is that our cleanup and damage deposit, I think, seems to be a little bit low related to some of the events that we have. Currently, right now, a cleanup damage deposit is required for $600, but Communications and Events believes this should be increased to at least somewhere in the range, and this is a range, to at least $2,500 to $5,000. Now, that may seem like a lot, but I want to clarify that this deposit would be returned to the event organizer and applicant if they successfully remove all trash and debris, but would protect the city of Cathedral City if damages are sustained before, during, or after the event. I think, yeah, go ahead,
So is
Councilmember.
our current policy is $600 no matter what they're renting?
Correct.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
That does seem low.
Yeah.
Although I know this is going to be a theme with me and probably my colleagues.
Sure.
Is, we want to be balanced because we don't want to set fees or impediments that would stop legitimate users, especially community users,
Absolutely.
nonprofit users, school group users, from having or using our facilities. With that said, even they should have some type of deposit that is somehow in relation to how much they're using. So is your
100%.
proposal to have, you're saying a range, is that
Yeah, I think it would be
different-
tiered based on
Okay.
attendance as well. So these are overall numbers. I think for the sake of
Well,
the
attendance
conversation.
and what they're using, right? Because if they use our
100%.
amphitheater, any of our equipment, I could see you need to have a substantial.
That's correct.
If they're just using our front steps, you need something for cleanup, I would say, but.
You do, absolutely,
but-
for cleanup, but at a minimum, you're right, that really should be, that's a great point, Councilmember, for sure. And so I think as we kind of hear that, yes, Councilmember, yeah.
Okay, so what I was thinking is kind of along those same lines, and that is that we really need to look that every venue is not equal.
Yes,
So even if you can mess up, the Paseo, that's not nearly as bad as you could mess up Town Square.
certainly.
You could ruin all the grass.
Although
let's say.
this range is based on, unfortunately, incurred costs from a recent event that was about $4,900. So that's where some of this is being informed based on some of the experiences we've had. But
Sure.
to your point, it isn't one size fits all, absolutely.
Sure, and we'd hate anything in our lives to be deemed by the very worst experience.
Absolutely.
To be led by that. We haven't had experiences like that before, and I hate to punish everybody moving forward, because even though you're going to give the money back if they clean up, I'm assuming you're putting their check in the bank. And to a lot of small agencies and groups, $2,500 is a lot of money.
I think absolutely, Councilmember, I take your point 100%. And I think what we would look at is right now in the amphitheater, for example, our rental fees are significantly less for a nonprofit that would be for a for-profit event. So I think we would probably look at tiered structures for nonprofit and for-profit as well. And I really think what we're getting at it's hard with projected attendance, especially for these first-time events, because you could have a big splash and not expect it, or you could be.
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
no, you're fine.
I thought
No,
I
you're
turned
fine.
it down.
No worries.
Off. Now they can't call ever again. See if that
But yes, this is a range, and like I said, very flexible. None of this has been adopted. This is all just based on kind of what we've seen over the course of the last 15 months since I've been here, and I think even consulting some other cities, as I've leaned on some other PIOs who have similar practices and venues in the valley, very well entrenched in that group. So it's informed by a number of steps along the research process, but this is really, to me, the key process for guidance from you all to see how we can kind of make this all work. And so, like I said, this is all just a hypothetical range. Nothing is necessarily headed in that direction. But I did want to shout out, this is a picture of what I consider, I want to recognize the gold stars and the people that do things the right way and reinforce the positive behavior. Battle in the Desert has been tremendous at cleaning up the last 2 years for events. I think I've only had one plastic cup that I've seen remaining for 2 years. And that's them actually cleaning up, as you can see. And that's a major event and a big responsibility that can be skirted from time to time. Not necessarily I've seen it here, but in other venues that I've been in Arlington, Texas, in my previous spot, is the cleanup phase can be one where that kind of gets skirted around the edges. And that, to me, is, as we continue to have all of these beautiful venues, they're going to become a lot less beautiful if we don't take care of them and make sure that they're pristine for future use and for the next event moving forward.
And can I follow up with one more question there? then?
Absolutely.
So using your experience from outside of Cathedral City,
Sure.
is there a breaking point where we'll start losing valuable people who want to use our facilities because we're asking for too much?
I think if
And
we have.
I'm not baiting you. I'm
No, I
genuinely
100%.
wanting to
I
know
think
that.
if we don't split it from a for-profit to nonprofit use, the amphitheater rental guide is very extensive and detailed. I think it's a really nice model to work off of for other venues. But there's definitely needs to be protections. And we even went to our AV operator, the Mercado Solutions, and told them that. And so we're working on, as the new contract comes up with him, to work in some more abbreviated fees or fees that are a little bit more reasonable for a nonprofit to be able to take on, because we want to have a good mixture of events. We don't want this to just become corporate alley. We want to have a lot of nonprofit local events as well in there. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does, and thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to continue to stop me. So the area of downtown Cathedral City for the rental fees, you see the amphitheater there, that is really currently the only venue that we have really protected fees or a policy in place mandating deposits and fees that other than the $600 cleanup deposit. So right now there's no fees attached to renting the Civic Center Plaza area, Town Square Park, Avenida Lalo Guerrero. And to me, while I don't think that these should rise to the level of $5,000 for a for-profit event in our amphitheater, because it's obviously a bigger venue with a lot of tech and components that go into that to raise the value of that venue, we still think that there should be a little bit of protection, not to keep people away and to limit the number of people that can apply for events here, because we want to get a little bit of everybody. but we also want to make sure that we're protected a little bit and that the seriousness of the event and the purpose from the event organizer, I think having some basic fees here as we've grown up as a city and are now having, okay, I won't use the amphitheater, I'll use the Avenida Lalo Guerrero, and that's completely free. And I think Mayor Pro Tem's asked multiple times at meetings about, why don't we have fees related to the festival lawn? And it's a great question. And I think, frankly, we're here to have that conversation with you all because I think we're at that point where we do need to start looking into that. That'd be my recommendation from a communications and events standpoint. So
I think that makes perfect sense. Because, the only argument I've heard is, oh, well, they're open and, so people can
Sure.
just come and use them. But, that's true at the parks for the gazebos, but if you want to reserve a gazebo and it's for a specific purpose, you want to
Absolutely.
cordon it off or you want to be in control, I'll just say,
Yes.
even if people can go, you're in control of that space, well, we charge for that, so it would make. It was actually kind of surprising to me, but I guess I knew it.
Me as well.
They were
Yeah.
allowing people to use the street, and we're recording off the street or use the downtown square for their purpose. Even if it
Yes.
is technically open to the public, but they're using it for the purpose, and we're not charging anything for that. So that
we're not, other than the SUP application
yeah,
fee.
because I know what the thinking always been. Well, if you're going to use it exclusively, then you're going to pay for something that will go towards the maintenance and the
You got it.
ultimately, yeah.
Absolutely.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilmember. So the proposed fees, and again, this is just proposed, kind of based on, this is a starting point I would consider this conversation. And so the proposed fees, I think Civic Center Plaza is a relatively modest area. I have that one a little bit lower at $250. Right now on the SUP application fee for downtown, as I just noticed things that could be cleaned up and changed as we're in the process of kind of looking at all of this. Currently, there's a separate listing for so many components of the Civic Center Plaza. It's kind of confusing. To me, that includes the breezeway, the Paseo area, the steps. That could all be labeled just as one venue, as Civic Center Plaza. And I think that'll give, especially if we're going to add a cost to the rental, then you're getting more bang for your buck for the facilities. And dividing that out, I didn't think made a lot of sense on the current proposal. So I think that's something we could make a change with your blessing here pretty soon. But, communications and events, we do feel like that, the Town Square Park area is another popular one that we have at $500 proposed. Avenida Lalo Guerrero, it's just such a big stretch of road that you really are responsible for with that. As we saw, the Mayan Festival did a 2-day event there as a third-party event organizer. So it just feels, to me, feels odd to have that big of a space for free as a rental facility. And then the festival lawn, which is probably the biggest square footage space and usage other than the amphitheater. To me, I think I have that one at 1,000 just because I think the festival lawn related to, potential city staff involvement, police being able to monitor things and activities that go on in that space. There's a little bit more liability attached to that usage than there is maybe using the Paseo, which is right next to our city police officers who have always been great about being able to keep an eye on things in that area when it's right next door to the building. But it is nice to have, for a square footage of that size, I think we need to probably move into some type of parameter for that as well. But if just using the annex, which is that area next to Luchador Brewing, the Michavella Fest, which I know many of you attended, we have that at $250, similar to the Civic Center Plaza. It's a modest area. It's not asking for too much, but obviously all of these would also require the cleanup and damage deposit. And this is on me as the department head, as I've learned, kind of in 15 months of where I am today versus where I was when I started. I think there could be stronger enforcement from my office and to be able to maintain that all rental fees, insurance requirements. We've got a lot of folks that get out in those things at the last minute. That creates a lot of unnecessary panic for staff, myself included. So we really are going to try to make sure. I think the SUP right now, as it's currently constructed, it's not as definitive, and I'll probably be relying on Eric's office and city attorney for some feedback and guidance on this as well, just to make sure we're truly protected. It's a little loose, I think, in the language at the moment about being able to get things in on time. And so 30 days really is, I think, the what we can afford to be able to wait on, especially when you require any type of city staff or services standpoint. These are duties, as in addition to what their main priority is, which is protecting and serving the city. So we're going to try to do a little bit better part on my end to be able to maintain that and to be able to enforce 30 days to be able to get all documents in and completed, ABC permit, COI, everything related to what it takes to put on an event.
Ryan?
Yes, I have questions. Go ahead.
Ryan, I have a
Yes,
question.
Councilmember.
Now, which area is the most requested area?
I I think lately it's been the amphitheater, but since I've been here, that Avenida Lalo Guerrero is an incredibly popular area as well, particularly, and the Civic Center Plaza Breezeway has become a really popular event space for, as you saw, the VIP reception for our sponsors at Snowfest, things like that. That obviously that was part of a bigger event, but we are getting interest of one-off requests that would maybe want to use the Civic Center Plaza area. So those are probably the two. Town Square Park, we've worked with the Postal Service occasionally if they send volunteers there for, it is an open park, so we've been pretty lenient about usage there. I haven't received any definitive requests, I don't think just for Town Square Park since I've been here, but the festival lawn is
The fountain's
popular.
kind of tore up, so maybe when the fountain gets in better shape.
Correct, yeah, absolutely, Councilmember, yeah, good point. So, but that's just what I'm saying right now, but I think the amphitheater has been, since I've been here, the number one request.
I
Thank
have
you.
two questions.
Sure.
So the breezeway, it's dark. You know, it's pretty dark in there. So if we start getting quite a bit of requests for that, we might think about, a stand-up pole that has, just something portable. But I've never paid attention to see if there's any plugs out there that you could use.
Yeah, there's atrium lighting, and then the plugs over there are typically reliable. But I think you're right. I mean, I think just for our own events, if we utilize that space to
Right.
continue, that
It's
we
just
could
dark.
work on lighting
It's a
with
little
facilities. So yeah, I think that's
And
a great
then under
point.
your staff resources, you refer
Sure.
to the importance of putting in the cost of public works, the hourly cost of public works.
Sure.
What is the hourly cost of public works?
I only have the police rates that are on me right now. I'd have to get with Deanna for the specifics. I usually send her an invoice for the hours that are worked, and then she comes back and we work that out with Kevin Biersack to be able to get that money back. But it's $135 per hour for an officer to work
When you
these.
find out what the public works is, will you send us an email?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I'll be happy to
And
send
my
you an
guess is
update.
going to be it depends. If you need
I think it
one or
probably
two,
does.
do they need a scissor lift? Do they need a truck? Do they need a?
It's
That's great.
it's
I'd like-
equipment
I'd like to
oriented.
know.
It's
Thank you.
time based for sure. And I think another component is it in the overtime space? Is it in the space that they're already
Sure,
working?
but it's important we know.
But it is 100%, absolutely. So I'll
And,
follow up.
whenever
on,
you have something that you just are doing on the fly, it's never as
You're right.
efficient.
Absolutely, I'll follow up on that
Those are
for
my
you
two
for
questions.
sure.
Thank you.
I have three.
Okay, go for it. Yeah, absolutely, Councilmember.
So you had some, not on this slide, the one you had before, you had some proposed or just thumbnail rates. So are those no matter how long it's used, or is that a starting place? You don't have to answer that, but I
Sure.
think when you come back, you might consider, if I'm going to use the Civic Center Plaza for 2 hours during the day, that might be different if I'm going to use it for 12 hours, or I'm going to use it for 2 days, and
I do think
so with the other things.
Time requirements probably do need to be required. In our amphitheater language, we have some of that as far as if you need to set up for an additional day, it's like half the charge of the rental. And I think we could do a tiered kind of hourly, and that's the type of feedback I'm looking for. So that's a
'cause
great point.
Again,
Yeah.
I'm thinking, if somebody's having a 2-hour event open to the public and kind of thing, we want to make it, if it has a benefit to the public, we want to make it affordable
Sure.
versus, so, then you would want to make it real low. Well, then you make it so low that somebody's coming and saying, oh, I'm going to rent it for 12 or 18 hours, and have this big thing. And we're like, well, they didn't hardly pay anything for
Yes.
basically using a public space for that length of time. So,
Yeah,
So-
I think that's a great point, and I think as I defined a little bit later in the PowerPoint that, to me, a small-scale event can be defined by anything less than 4 hours. So we could probably look at, a tiered structure. If it goes over that 4 hour, then maybe it's a bit more substantial or a little bit less, depending on if you get on the other side of that. So I think that's a great point, something we need to look at.
Okay, my next question is, so some of these spaces, are they just renting the space, or by renting it, are you going to include some kind of public works, I guess would be a good way of looking at it. And where that comes up is where you say Avenida Lalo Guerrero. Well, you can't really just rent the street because it needs to be, for safety's sake, for our own liability, needs to be closed off, which involves labor and equipment. So I'm just throwing this
Absolutely.
out. When you
Yeah.
come back, I would say, some of them may just include just the space. Maybe we'll dump the existing trash cans for you or something like that. That's what you get. And if
Yes.
you want extra, then you need to pay extra, But some of them, like, the street, I would say, well, you're not just going to just rent the street and then trust them to, follow these minimums. We may say, well, this needs to come with something like, we're going to block it off. And again, that's where your hourly or, over so many hours may actually also make sense.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a great point, and I think not only Public Works, but if it's road closures involved, that could require public safety assistance as well. So I think that's a good point, and that obviously would be an SUP that would have to be formally approved by you all as a council, like you said, with the streets being open. Like you said, it's not really open. You have to close it, make sure there's protections in place for security, and so and that is kind of, I think, the charge that I have moving forward too, is to be able to make sure that the staff time we do have committed to this from a Public Works, from a police standpoint, that we're getting some of those resources allocated for by our event organizers for sure, while still not prohibiting. So it's a tough line to walk as far as, you get too cost prohibitive, then you're gonna, like to Councilmember Ross's standpoint, may see a lower amount of applications. So we want to find that happy medium. I don't think we know that yet, which is why it's in the exploratory phase, but I think to your point, that's a great thing for us to look at, and I think we probably will have to look at doing hourly structures to the rentals.
And so my last thing is, so
Sure.
for the 30 days, I think that's great. You do need to set some parameters, and then hopefully, because I know we've had events, I was surprised at one of them that we had approved them to use one location, and then they went to use a free location, but as one of the people to help to prove that the SUP, I'm like, well, how does that happen that they just change their use permit once the council approves it? So I'm not being critical of that or need to revisit that, but so I'm just saying that no, I think the 30 days and some firmness in there. But with that said, I think there does need to be just a touch of waffle language.
Yeah.
So that if something is of a public interest and they are 2-3 weeks away, say 21 days away, that maybe it's not so easy that they just go to you, but maybe with city manager approval
Right.
on a, and say something has to be extenuating circumstances, not just that, oh, I forgot or,
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, and I think in that, particular instance too, that's where it goes back to the cleanup deposit and some of the things. If you are moving out of a rental facility that has those protections, and then you move out of that facility, and like you said, everything's free, then it kind of opens us up to liability that we didn't have some of that already up front. So I think that's a great point. And
Yeah, but my other part is that, that maybe there does need to be just some out
yes,
as for the time period. I know we prefer just to say it has to be 30 days or that's it. And we could say that, but there maybe should be a little asterisk.
there will be. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely need to have some flexibility there for sure, especially for emergencies and costs and issues like that for sure.
Thank you.
So staff resources, so Councilmember Ross kind of led a nice transition to that point, which is, we believe that the updated SUP should have better specifications related to staff needed for setup, day of event responsibilities. And this is, I stress this by saying this is scope beyond the communications and event staff. There are a lot of things that we can do as part of our responsibilities that we're happy to continue to do. But we're not public safety personnel, we're not public works, we're not facilities. So there are some things and components that I feel like we need to be able to make sure that we're keeping track of moving forward. And so, if event organizers plan to use Cathedral City Police Department, they need to list the number of officers listed, I believe. And the question could come up, well, I've never done an event, or I'm new to the event space. How do I go about doing this? And I think that the question for that, you come to us as the communications and event staff, and we'll be happy to work those questions out. And I have multiple times with SUPs. So that, they may not know that answer, but we can work it out with them in advance before it even gets to you all for approval. Because I think right now I'm taking a lot of SUPs, and I'm going to question, well, how many officers do you need? And it needs to be worked out, I think, in that as close to that 30-day period as we can. That way, when I come to you all for an SUP as a council, you've got really all the information there and are not just hoping that it all gets, kind of executed properly. Fortunately, we take safety very seriously here across our entire staff, and that starts with leadership. We've done a great job, but I think making sure our services are accounted for from other departments is important. And so talking to Chief Crum, we've had multiple conversations about this. I think it came up actually during the Mayan Festival SUP as well about, talking about if an event is serving alcohol, there is a requirement for a minimum officers needed. And I think we need to make sure that that's a little firmer in our language required. And it may be more than 2 officers on site. That's what we have as a minimum. But if the attendance rates get up to, let's say, a third-party organizer, we get, for example, a Coachella event, oriented with that, and the attendance is, somewhere between 15 to 30,000, 30,000. Well, 2 officers isn't going to cut 15 to 30,000 being served with alcohol. We do approach those attendance levels for Balloon Festival, which Chief Crum obviously increases our police force on that event, as Taste of Jalisco also becomes probably in the spring. Those are our 2 most popular events based on attendance, anywhere from 12 to 20,000 for a weekend, which is a lot of people in a city of about 50,000 people. So the billable rate, as I mentioned, is $135 an hour for officers. Partial or all anticipated payments really need to be due prior to the event. And then the availability of CCPD, they have also requested if they could be notified at least 30 days in advance if they have to staff these events and be able to provide that. As an additional requirement, we also believe that any needs from public works or facilities are also listed on that SUP form, because I think that's one, there's a lot of safety language in there and protocol related to public safety. There's not as much related if you need a road closure, or, maybe you didn't know you needed a road closure and then you get to the day. And I know sometimes, ABC, if you're, pursuing alcohol, I do know and I'm comfortable saying, talking to Jamie Benson, who did our Desert Brewfest event, sometimes ABC will come with modifications late in the game that you have to react to, and you can't cut corners there, obviously. So that can modify, and that's where Councilmember Gregory brings up a good point. We have to have a little bit of wiggle room as a staff to be able to accommodate from a public safety standpoint.
So when you're talking about the anticipated needs for public safety, like cones, that's what you were talking about when you were first making it, like, for instance, Buddy Rogers, or
Sure.
if that road, and they would know as a new event that you have to do the road and put the signs out and all that, so that would have to be itemized, and you're going to refine the SUP process that was reflected in that.
Absolutely.
Is that how it's all connected?
Yes,
Okay.
that's absolutely
Okay,
the case.
okay,
Yeah,
I
for
got it.
sure. And I think maybe some stronger language about consulting communications and events before you submit the application. I think we could list a little bit more detailed language related to that, because we want to be an expert to make the process easier for folks that are
Right,
applying.
right.
We don't want to make it prohibitive in any ways. But yeah, absolutely. That's
Okay.
a great question there.
Okay.
And
Ryan?
I've never seen, I'm sorry. I've never seen an event where you, or before Chris, or now Christina, where, chickens with your heads cut off, right? I mean, you're there for the entire event for most things. Is your value also worked into that?
It's not. I see it as our role and as a job responsibility in a lot of ways, as far as our commitment to the events. And we've had these conversations and learning. There's a reason Monday isn't as popular of an event day as Saturday and Sunday, and so I think that comes with the territory a little bit. And communications, you're never really truly separated from it completely. You're always kind of ready to go. And so, but that's a good question, and if that's something to explore, we can work that into the assessment. But
Or
right
if
now,
nothing
it's
else,
not.
to let people know what a value they're getting, because, we have these experienced
I appreciate that, Councilmember. Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, Ryan?
Yeah, Councilmember.
Also, I believe that depending on what area is being requested to be rented, it also has to match the number of police officers, and also if it includes liquor or not, and also the amount of security officers. So depending, for instance, if they're renting just the El Paseo down here,
Right.
we're not going to require 2 or 4 police officers plus security.
Well, if alcohol is being served, we do, in the current
Correct.
SUP language, require private security, and it has to be certified by, the state. So we do require any alcohol-oriented events right now to, in addition to public safety assistance, have the private security necessary as well. So, if it's a small enough scale event, maybe we work with the police chief, and maybe it's 1 officer that's needed if it's a small area. I don't know. I consult, I want to take the expertise of public safety. I don't have that background, and so talking to Chief Crum, he thought at minimum for an alcohol-oriented event with alcohol being served in any area in the city, he would prefer to have at least 2 officers available in case there's some type of response that they have to kind of take care of there.
Now, is there a certain event that we would not need police officers, that a security company will be sufficient because it will be a lot cheaper?
We could, that's kind of the feedback. I mean, in the current language right now, I don't think there's just necessarily a specific mandate. This is kind of a proposal putting forward. I'd have to look exactly the way that's specifically defined. I think talking to our police chief, we appreciate any private security that we get to help with these events, but having a direct response from CCPD is always, I think, the preferred route, talking to our law enforcement professionals, but I'm open to the dialogue, and if that's something that you all support, we'll be able to make it happen.
So they should probably be the expert. My experience, just off the top of my head, would be if you're charging for admission or charging for the alcohol, you should have the police there. If you're having a family wedding thing, if you have enough security, the chief may say, I don't really need to have a police officer there. It's more of a family or, a small community event. That's just off the top of my head what I usually have seen in the past. But usually if you're charging admission or charging for the alcohol, then you really need to have the police officers.
Correct.
And I think that gets...
Walk, maybe not so much.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that gets to the public-private component. If you have public entry for an event, obviously, you have a lot more people coming in from an influx. If it's a private event that maybe wants to rent that Paseo area or, the Breezeway and our Civic Center Plaza, here I am using all the different names, but just Civic Center Plaza, I'm going to try to call it that moving forward. If they use that as a private event that doesn't necessarily require an ABC permit to serve if it's not being sold for sale, then that probably is a situation where private security or volunteers are enough. But, again, I would want to visit with the police chief to see kind of what, that's a great question for me to look into. So I'll follow up on that for you.
Ryan, we've done in the past, we've had private security checking for alcohol, and they've done a pretty good job. They took their job seriously. I can remember 3-4 events, but there was also police officers there as well. So if the police chief figures out, hey, they want to hire their own individual private to save some money in accordance with the police department, I wouldn't have a problem with that either. But I do agree, when there's alcohol, there should be some local police there. But as far as at what level, the chief would have to,
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Yep, thank you. So, just mentioning, Public Works, is one that I think you all are pretty aware, and I think you obviously know Facilities has a role in this too, but Facilities really has stepped up their game, particularly in recent events, to be able to be there, as needed related to putting these events on. There are a lot of hours that they put in to being able to make sure all of our properties are maintained and cleaned up and ready to go for events, and have even helped with install in addition to Public Works Facilities, Public Works Department, rather. So the current application is just really vague when it comes to recovery of staff time and being able to keep that kind of at the forefront of the event organizer as they go, that this isn't just communications and events. If you need somebody else, if you need a road closure, that's work that is required from our Public Works Department to do. I've helped them in the past, but I certainly don't have the expertise to be responsible for making sure we have water, K-rails and everything. We have equipment for those things. It takes time away from their normal responsibilities related to infrastructure and improvements for the roads. So updated checklist for small scale events. So this is, again, just something that has come up as a thought. If an event doesn't require staff assistance beyond communications and events, staff would like feedback from the city council on maybe a checklist that could be approved administratively to expedite the process for the event applicants. Examples of this would be really small scale events, that don't require anything beyond myself, Christina Velasquez, Kevin Lockwood,
Like what?
and my communications and events department. Yeah.
Name an example.
Yeah, so I've got a list of a few. Autism Walk,
Okay.
which was a really low maintenance event, really just opening and closing. There was no alcohol served related to that. They didn't have anything other than a DJ that just had to plug into the stage. They weren't required to use our significant AV equipment, something like that. DAP Health is another, I felt, very low maintenance group to work with. They did an excellent job with cleanup, with setup. It's a wonderful event that they've already renewed their interest in for 2024. The Home Depot Foundation beautification event, the Salvation Army, that was really more of just communications and events supporting from a marketing effort. Didn't really require any type of staff related to. Now, there was at one point that they were potentially exploring a road closure. We had an agreement with PSUSD that we were not able to satisfy that part of their SUP. So there wasn't anything beyond communications and events. So these kind of, and I would consider, as I mentioned, smaller scale, we would define this, but anything less than 4 hours, I think, could be considered a small scale event. event. And with this, the advantage comes that, if it's a checklist that you all bless as a council and approve, that, we have that language intact, which is obviously nice to have. But, related to if they're trying to market the event in advance, sometimes with the flow of council, meetings, can't get 4 or 5 SUPs on there at one time, obviously. So, to give them a little bit of chance to market, if we do have, some that kind of skirt that 30-day and want to get in the last minute, we want to be as accommodating as we possibly can. School district groups that have approached me about doing concerts in the Breezeway and the Paseo, things like that are really minimal staff commitment, no alcohol served, no public works, no public safety, unless it's deemed from a volunteer basis the chief wants to support it, which they often do. And that's the thing too, is a lot of these events from a volunteer standpoint are being seen out in the community, which I know is a council priority for you all. Our public safety officials are usually at most of these events to make an appearance to show support. So we have that backing, and that's not where we're trying to get the charges. It's really the actions that they're putting together for the event, not just showcasing support from a moral or community standpoint.
So I understand small events. I think I understand big events. But what about, so I'm just going to throw one out off the top of my head. What about Esser's participation, in that big bike thing? I mean, it's huge, but they don't actually stop in Cathedral City, but they do provide garbage service along the way, and I think they might have their own security. I mean, how do
Is this Tour de Palm Springs?
Yeah.
So with that, they do require police assistance and public works assistance. So, and they in the past have asked for sponsorship support from the council.
That's right.
So the clarification, my next bullet point, which I think answers some of that, would be the exception would be made if the event applicant is serving alcohol. I think any event that's serving alcohol should still come to you all for approval as an SUP, and or requesting city sponsorship. So if they're asking you all for a waiver of the SUP permit, that needs to go to you all as a formal action as council.
Well,
So-
and they request like closing of a lane. I think anything that closes a street or a lane, we should
Agreed.
know about. And
That was the next
I also think
one.
anything that has amplified music after a certain hour, and
Sure.
you can determine what that is, should probably come to us, especially
I think 10 to
if
11
it's
is
gonna
that
be,
magic hour. Yep.
And anything that has non-standard lighting should probably come to us. And the reason I'm saying this is because I think the community, if it's going to cause an inconvenience to the local community, they're going to have an expectation that the council has heard it and at least weighed, whether they agree or not, at least weighed the inconvenience versus the public good and made a decision to move forward.
100%. And I think if that is the, kind of the parameter we're working off of, every single one that I mentioned there would fall into that category. No noise issues, very low tones, no alcohol being served, no conditions beyond communications and events related to staff. Yeah, no pyrotechnics or anything like that, no drone light shows or anything. Something that really is just a basic rental of the facility to be able to have a smaller engagement. But I think also we would work in, if the projected attendance is anything north of 3,000, which I think is that kind of rung in our current policy, that needs to go to you all as a council. That becomes a more significant event, I think, at that point. We're talking about, a couple hundred people if it's a private engagement.
Because it uses up parking and
Right.
its own noise and its
Yes.
own congestion. Yeah.
Absolutely. But to your point, anything that would require a road closure approval, I would feel uncomfortable not bringing it to you all
And
as a
are
council.
there neighboring cities that have a
Yeah, I mean,
similar
I've consulted,
structure?
Rancho Mirage
Okay.
also has an amphitheater. I've talked to Palm Springs quite a bit.
Okay.
We have a really strong PIO group in the valley that, I'm helping to lead to try to get more partnership. I'm friends with the PIO in Coachella and, all of that, just to be able to talk to, so many of these cities like us have tourism-related events and fall season events. I mean, as you can see, this year it felt like even more so. Every weekend you could pick
Right.
4 or 5 different things, and I think you all went to some 4 or 5 different things on certain days, sometimes just here in Cathedral City. So, but yeah, anything that would require any type of funding or any type of sponsorship, I'm with you, Councilmember, I'm getting rid of the waiver word. It's sponsorship because we are putting forth effort to be able to, and we need to get something out of that as a city as well. So, so I think that needs to be, continue to be authorized by you all as a council. But, and again, shouting out some of our Gold Star tenants, the Autism Walk, I mean, to have this, and they kept it to a T on the site plan map, I mean, to have this, they gave this to me probably 90 days in advance. We got to see it. They made minor changes throughout the way, informed me every step of the way in the process, came out for multiple site visits and tours. We want to reinforce the really great nonprofits and for-profit events, frankly, that we have here in our community that are good stewards of our venues. And I would say, 99% of them are meeting that mark, which is great. So that goes to the checklist, and kind of I'm getting some great feedback from you all as a council, but at a minimum, we would want to make sure that that small scale event classification would be no staff requests beyond communications and events, unlocking the gate, making sure that they're set up properly, no street closures, no alcohol being served. They still have to be required to pay the special use application, permit application fee. If they were to make that decision to ask for a sponsorship of that SUP, then obviously that would categorize as something that would need to come to you all as a formal action. The cleanup and damage deposit, which really needs to be non-negotiable across all events, no matter any scale and scope. And then proof of insurance with a minimum of $1 million, although there have been protecting also the event and the city of Cathedral City. But there also have been events that we have had to require more than that. The circus, I imagine, I think gave us $2 million, as we all, as a council, to have extra protection. So there's flexibility for you all as a council if we need to ask for a little bit more if it's something that's a bigger scale event, or an event that has any type of activity that may give us a little bit of heartburn to make sure that we're protected. That would be, but I think at minimum, we obviously ask for a COI. Most of those are pretty easy to produce and they're not too labor intensive to be able to provide
Excuse
that.
me, Ryan?
Yes.
On the insurance, is that just for bodily injury, or is it damage to property?
It's for a number of, it's about 10 to 12 different items.
It covers everything that we would be able to, if we lost something during that.
Injury is a huge one, but damage to personal property is also another one for sure. And any actions that would take place, that would cause any stoppage or loss of attendees, or anything that would not physically as a life form, but to be able to protect us from anything that does go south in that event. So it's a host of things that they have listed in each COI. Most policies are pretty standard, but I can get you a list of everything that does protect us from.
Well, if it covers everything, that's good. And then I believe that word is indemnification, where they can't hold the city responsible if something terrible happens. We're completely.
Yeah, I want to, that's kind of where I'm at with the SUP too, to make sure some of that legal language is a little bit more visible and prominent. I think right now it's a little vague for my comfort. So I think that is part of it that needs to be worked into a little bit more of our formal document. Then when we get it signed, it really does kind of become more of a contract than something that they have to execute properly, for sure. Yes, anybody have? Okay. A copy of a site plan map, the one that I just showed you, is really great. I think, as I was talking to the city manager about this, the area where they can kind of just sketch where they're going to be, I think we really need to hold them to a site plan. I mean, you can do a pretty basic site plan in most software. We can work with them, but it is nice to really have where are your tables and chairs going, where especially if you're serving alcohol, where the bar is stationed. All of that has to be vetted. Our fire marshal needs to get involved if there's any type of lawn games or carnival components to it. So there's a lot of things that, it's really nice to have a site plan. And what we can do, I think instead of having the blank form, is we can have either a digital file made available by our webmaster graphic designer. He kind of already has a template you can work off of where he would give you the backdrop. So we'll make it easy on folks. But even if they could, I don't even care if they do it on Post-its, even if they can just kind of show us the basic design of where you're going to be and where everything's going to be placed versus, giving a little bit too much flexibility to change things closer to the event time, I think would be nice to have that.
Ryan?
Yes, Councilman.
Now, if food's going to be sold, are you going to be able to certify that they have all the proper permits from the health department?
Absolutely. All events, the prerequisite is that they're vetted and approved in advance of the event, 2 weeks in advance by Riverside County.
Even though they're going to be a smaller venues, you don't have to come to us if you have that already taken care of.
You're required to have the environmental help, but yes, each event organizer has to secure that in advance of the event. If you do it less than 2 weeks, I think the fee's $330, I want to say, as an extra charge if you don't give Riverside County Environmental Health enough notice. And they will often show up on site to look for not only your permit approval, but also to inspect your workstation. So, but they do have to secure that in advance of the event and show that documentation. We haven't had any issues with that so far, fortunately.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Well, that kind of concludes my presentation formally. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I wanted to mention from the 5-year strategic plan, obviously, one of the main charges that I have and responsibilities I hold very seriously is to promote additional community events and celebrations, but also making sure they're safe and secure, protecting the city from liability. And this is obviously just a presentation. There's no formal action required, just having the conversation. And so I appreciate your time and happy to answer any questions that you have.
Great, thank you for that. And I love the idea of the, kind of touting the small event venues, especially as it relates to school children, that they know that they can use this. And I know
Absolutely.
they have in the past, but it's mostly just the high school, so it's nice that the little ones get to hear.
Yes,
Show their stuff, so I really appreciate that.
Thank you,
Okay,
Mayor.
questions from council?
I just have one more.
All right.
Sure.
Clarification.
Sure.
Now, also, the small events, did you mention the amount of attendees?
Yeah, it would be a part of that. Anything, I think, when we get north into the thousands, that's when I think it starts getting into a larger scale event. So we'll have to talk about what that specifically would be as a definition. But, I think a couple hundred, you can justify that as a small scale event. But I think if it gets north of in the thousands, I would want you to bring that forward to council for any type of approval necessary.
That's it, thank you.
Yep.
Great.
What other cities consider small? Because even 1,000 is not necessarily a very small event.
Yeah, you're right.
On what they're using too, but.
Absolutely, and I think I think 1,000 could be a good benchmark to maybe be the threshold in anything that goes. And the hard part about projected attendance is it's really just that. I mean, especially for these first year events, I think we've seen large projections, and knowing kind of where we are in the landscape and being here for 15 months, I go, well, that probably won't happen. But it's really kind of an estimate for sure, based on how much marketing has been done. But I think for new events, it's always hard to. Your first year is always going to be your hardest as far as attendance, and so as it continues to build, or if you all as a council see it as a fit long term, we can work with them to continue to build that. But you're right. I mean, the definitions are subjective to a degree. So.
If I can't, I just wanted to applaud you, especially as you spoke about identifying and quantifying and recovering to some degree we call in-kind costs. I know when some of us came on council, I think the guy at the other end who was one that often spoke up about that almost everything we got, I would say blah, 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 and then I would say the city will have certain in-kind costs, and we would ask, well, what is that and how much is it? And we didn't often have a very defined answer. I know we still probably don't totally have a defined answer. That's what your goal is, although I think Public Works has been better and others have been better about it, saying to us, well, it should be about this many hours, about this many. So at least that is getting some recognition, because some of the events we were talking about were large, major events, and then we would just say in-kind costs, which if you don't define it, nobody thinks the city is contributing it, and it is a contribution.
Absolutely.
So, and it doesn't give the council a chance to say, well, we should be recovering some of that if the council feels they want to, or we should at least be being recognized as the city, not us, but as the city, of being a sponsor of this amount of in-kind work. And I think that has and continues to some degree slip through the cracks, where, and then we get treated as the city as, well, you didn't really contribute to this event, when we know that there may have been thousands of dollars of in-kind costs that the city ate. So I applaud that, and I hope you continue to be able to better define that and find a way to incorporate that in the discussion.
Thank you, Councilmember. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Any other questions? All right.
Get out of here.
Any questions or comments from the public, although?
Mayor, I did not receive any requests to speak forms, and there are no public attendees in the meeting.
All right. This item is for discussion and direction only. No formal action is required. And thank you, Ryan. Great job.
Thank you.
And we will be back for the special city council meeting at 5 o'clock. This meeting.
Yeah, and before you go,
Okay.
The plan is sometime in January, February, once we've got all this put together with an actual rental rate schedule and deposits and things like that, is to bring it back for formal action.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned. See you back at 5. Perfect.